Hello my dear char readers. Today I'm going to be talking about The Secret History by Donna Tartt. An excellent novel. The story is told from the perspective of Richard Papin. He lives a very sort of bleak, boring life in a random Californian suburb before he gets accepted with a lot of financial aid into a wonderful liberal arts college in Vermont called Hampton College. So yeah, he moves across the country and he... Why is there a plane? Why are there little planes? So he moves across the country for his third year of college and wants to study Greek because he'd been studying it before and it was the only thing he was really passionate about. But he finds that the Greek class is extremely exclusive. It's run by some eccentric professor called Julian who only allows 5 students, and they are the most mysterious, elusive group of rich young people you can think of. Richard's academic advisor says don't even try, he's not going to let you in. But through various circumstances he does get to join this group and he becomes a classics major and ends up isolating himself from essentially the rest of the faculty and the whole college to be friends with this group of people and only study with them. The Greek professor Julian inspires such passion in these kids for and almost reverence for classical thought and culture and ethics, and kind of brings them into a bit of a frenzy about it. And they don't really fit into the student body for not caring about the same things. Like I remember one passage where they explained to one of the boys in the group that yeah, somebody landed on the moon, like, you know, 20 years ago, and he was like, I had no idea, because he's so involved in what happened 2,000 years ago. The 2-page prologue explains that within this group of 6 Greek students, one of them has been murdered by the other 5, and the first half of the book is leading up to that murder, and the second half is sort of the aftermath of it. One thing I loved about this book was just how much of it wasn't a mystery and yet was still so sort of mysterious, and you still wanted to, you know what happens next. When it says on it, the secret history. You know they're not going to get caught for this murder. It says secret, but you're still up until the last page like, you know? It's such a rich story, it's so multi-layered, it's so clever. Thank you Donna Tartt for bringing this into the world. But on the other hand, a lot of people hate it because it is like a book for intellectual supremists. All the characters are exceedingly pretentious. There are random Latin quotes throughout the book, which frankly I felt quite supreme about being able to translate because I did used to study Latin. But it's exceedingly pretentious and selective, but not in an ignorant way. It knows it is. It knows that these are rich kids that don't have anything to care about in the world but Homer. I'm going to read you the first paragraph of chapter 1 because it's so descriptive of the entire novel. So such a thing as the fatal flaw, that shadowy dark crack running down the middle of life, exists outside literature. I used to think it didn't. Now I think it does. And I think that mine is this, a morbid longing for the picturesque at all costs. You can see that, you can feel it running throughout the book. It's so lovely in one sense. It brings such lightheartedness and joy and happiness to this novel. You know, as soon as Richard gets out of California and comes to this college, everything is beautiful. Everything is described so wonderfully. He has these weekends in the country with his friends in one of their aunt's manor houses, and they go on boat trips and they drink and they talk about their books, and it's just beautiful. But you know this book is about a murder and secrecy, and there's just underlying currents of that constantly, even in the really, really happy bit. There's just random little comments about, you know, death. When I have a paperback book, I dog-ear it, and not at the page that I'm currently at. I dog-ear it at significant things. I had a while when I would only dog-ear the pages that mentioned the title of the book, and it was really weird to see how well they're spaced. But in this, I dog-eared mentions of the death. So the death happens roughly here, but these are the mentions of the death beforehand. I can read one for you. So Richard, when he's just joined this friendship group pretty much, has a little spiel about them being sort of not like ordinary college students and being able to keep a really like adult routine. And this says, much of this routine remained intact even during the terrible days after Bunny's death. You know, just a bit of ominous foresight murder. So Richard wants to see the world through these rose-tinted spectacles, but there are just these cracks of negativity throughout the thing. It's never mediocre. It's said of the professor that he takes relish in sort of acute classical dramatics, but I think it runs throughout the whole book that it's either dramatically wonderful or dramatically bad. In the New York Times' review on the back of this copy, it says, imagine the plot of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment crossed with the story of Euripides' Bacchae set against the backdrop of Bret Easton Ellis's The Rules of Attraction. That is the perfect recipe for a book and an incredible descriptor. I mean, Hampton College, Camden College, they are the same thing. I imagine them to be the same thing. Admittedly, I know nothing about Euripides, but I can see the classical infusion and even his writing comes into this book somewhere. But the crime and punishment thing, whilst the story parodies it in a way of being, you know, there's this horrible crime and then there's the people sort of mentally settling themselves with the moral aspect of it and trying to see it as both them being not bad people, but also the act itself not being that bad while also being terrible. I also think there's just such an element of fate that ties those two books, where the initial circumstances that led up to the murder were inevitable, and logically at that point in time whether to decide, you know, to commit that act or not, you know, if you weighed up the pros and cons, it made sense to do it, and then the entire aftermath of that is just unavoidable. There's no other conceivable way of it turning out. This whole novel mirrors Greek tragedy impeccably. The structure, for one, it starts out with the prologue that describes the events that are chronologically midway, and the aspects of sort of fate and inevitability about it. And you know that each of the characters secretly adores being involved in such a homage to the classics, such a respected parody for everything they revere. I think this story is also quite karmic on the individual scale. Each character individually goes through the tribulation of having to deal with the fact they've done something that is objectively amoral, even if they did it for, you know, understandable, justifiable reasons. And back through Richard's rose-tinted spectacles, they are great as a group of friends. They make a decision and they follow through with it, and it's not even so bad when they're trying to deal with the aftermath of it, with the consequent investigation. That's okay. It's only when they break down as a group that things start getting really bad. It's like negative danger whiplash for the end of the book, when all of the negative stuff has actually stopped happening. But consequently, they've become a mirror of their prior actions and, you know, paranoid and distrustful. The characters are so rich, and each seems to take a different facet of how anyone would respond to being in that situation, which is really interesting. In conclusion, I love this book. I thought it was so intellectual and smart and many-layered. I liked the characters, I liked the plot, I loved the pace. Everything about it. Straight up 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Would read again.